The Thanksgiving that cost us 5 years of family gatherings started with a single question about a car badge. Picture this. Thanksgiving 1978. While America debated whether the Eagles would make playoffs and followed Michigan football championships, our family dinner table had an invisible dividing line more intense than any sports rivalry. The turkey smelled perfect, the pie looked amazing, but everyone was waiting for the bomb to drop. On one side, my grandfather Henry, 65 years at Ford, wearing his service pin like it was military honors. That pin represented 3 generations of family identity. It wasn't jewelry, it was his entire life story in metal. On the other, my father Carl, Chevrolet dealership owner, wearing his Bodie pin with the same fierce pride. His family's automotive legacy stretched back to his grandfather's Detroit dealership. The tension was thicker than Chicago weather during a blizzard, with everyone carefully avoiding the conversation we all knew was coming. This wasn't about cars anymore. This was about family legacy being tested, about emotional connections to metal and machinery that had become more important than the people sitting at the table. What nobody knew, that dinner would be the last time our entire family would be together for 1,826 days. All because of the question I was about to ask about restoring a Chevy instead of inheriting Grandpa's Ford. Primera Juracao, Henry's father, 1920s, 1950s. The Johnson family's Ford loyalty began with Henry's father Walter, who worked on Henry Ford's assembly line during the same era when college football fans were passionately debating Texas football strategies and whether Arch Manning would continue the family legacy. Walter wasn't just an employee, he was a true believer in Ford's vision of putting America on wheels. Seeing each vehicle that rolled off the line as a piece of the American dream made tangible. He bought his first Model A in 1928 with money saved over 3 years of careful budgeting, and that vehicle represented more than transportation, it represented dignity, progress, and the realization of ambitions that had seemed impossible for a man who had grown up farming with horses. The day he drove that Model A home, his entire neighborhood gathered to witness the marvel, and Walter felt a pride that would fuel his loyalty to Ford for the rest of his life. His emotional connection to the Blue Oval was as unwavering as any Eagles fan's devotion to their team through winning and losing seasons, becoming a fundamental part of his identity that he would pass down to his children with the same conviction that he passed down family values and work ethic. Segunda Juracao, Henry, 1950s, 1980s. Henry inherited his father's Ford devotion with the same intensity that Michigan football fans bring to their rivalry with Ohio State, seeing his automotive allegiance as an extension of family loyalty and personal integrity. He started at the River Rouge plant in 1955, the same year his father retired after 35 years of service, creating a symbolic passing of the torch that felt almost sacred in its significance. Henry's entire identity became intertwined with Ford. He met his wife at a Ford company picnic, bought his first home with his Ford employee discount, and raised his children with stories about Mr. Ford's vision that were told with the reverence usually reserved for family legends. Every promotion, every milestone, every family celebration was marked by a new Ford vehicle in the driveway, each one representing another chapter in the Johnson family story. When his daughter Sarah married Carl, a Chevrolet salesman, it felt like a betrayal more personal than any Ohio State versus Michigan defeat, striking at the very heart of everything Henry believed about family continuity and legacy preservation. Tercera Juracao, Sarah and Carl, 1980s-2000s. Sarah grew up steeped in Ford culture, but fell in love with Carl despite his Chevrolet affiliation. Drawn to his kindness and shared values that transcended their automotive differences. Their courtship was filled with good-natured teasing about their brand loyalties, with Sarah joking that she'd have to hide Carl's Chevy when her father visited and Carl playfully suggesting they could compromise with a Ford-powered Chevrolet. But after marriage, the tension became as unpredictable as Chicago weather in spring, with sunny moments of harmony suddenly giving way to stormy arguments triggered by the smallest automotive references. Henry refused to help them buy their first house unless they bought a Ford. leading to their first major argument as a couple that left both of them questioning whether their love could survive the weight of family tradition. The strain was constant, with Henry making passive-aggressive comments at every family gathering and Carl feeling like he was navigating the emotional equivalent of an Airbus recall, constantly having to prove his worth and safety to the family while dealing with the underlying suspicion that he would never fully be accepted. Quarter Jericho Michael, 2000s present. Michael grew up watching the family conflict with the same intensity that Texas football fans follow every game. Acutely aware of the invisible lines drawn between family members based on their automotive preferences, he loved both his grandfather and his father deeply and felt torn between their worlds, often feeling like he had to choose sides in a battle he never asked to fight. When Henry promised him his cherished 1965 Mustang for his 18th birthday if he maintained good grades, Michael was thrilled, not just about the car, but about the opportunity to bond with his grandfather over something they both loved. But then he discovered a rusted-out 1957 Chevy Bel Air in a neighbor's barn and fell in love with its graceful lines and tragic beauty. The decision he faced felt as monumental as whether Arch Manning would live up to his family's football legacy, forcing him to choose between honoring family tradition and following his own heart. The day Michael told his grandfather about the Chevy coincided with a major news story about an Airbus recall that had the entire aviation industry rethinking safety protocols. But for the Johnson family, their own safety protocols were about to be tested in ways they never imagined. Henry had been planning the Mustang handover for months, treating it not just as a car transfer but as a sacred family ritual. He'd already ordered new parts from the Ford dealership cleared space in his garage, specifically for the project, and imagined the Saturday afternoons they'd spend working on it together, much like Michigan football coaches planning their season strategy with meticulous attention to detail. In his mind, this wasn't just about a car, it was about continuing the family legacy, about passing down values and traditions that had defined the Johnsons for generations. When Michael nervously explained that he'd found a Chevy project car, instead Henry's face went from the excitement of an Eagles fan watching. Their team scored to the devastation of a last-second loss. The hope in his eyes were replaced by confusion and hurt. "I don't understand," Henry said, his voice trembling with emotion that surprised even him. "After everything our family has given to Ford... After everything your great-grandfather built with his own hands, you'd choose a Chevy?" The argument that followed was more heated than any Ohio State versus Michigan postgame analysis, with both men digging into positions they'd held for generations and emotions running higher than anyone anticipated. Henry delivered the ultimatum that would haunt them both for years, his words echoing in the silence that followed. "If you choose that Chevy, you choose it over your family, over me, over everything we stand for." Michael, heartbroken but determined to follow his own path, chose the Chevy with the same conviction that Texas football fans have in their team's ability to overcome adversity, unaware of the years of silence and separation that would follow. For 5 years, the Johnson family holidays were as divided as fans during an Ohio State versus Michigan game, with conversations carefully curated to avoid mentioning the automotive elephant in the room. Henry refused to attend any gathering where Michael's Chevy might be mentioned, creating a family dynamic as unpredictable as Chicago weather patterns where sunny family moments could suddenly turn stormy. Thanksgiving dinners became exercises in emotional navigation, with Sarah carefully seating family members to minimize tension and Carl avoiding any mention of his dealership work to prevent triggering arguments. Christmas celebrations felt hollow without Michael's presence, the empty chair at the table serving as a constant reminder of the division that automotive loyalty had created. Sarah and Carl's marriage strained under the pressure of choosing between father and son, with tensions rising and falling like the fortunes of the Eagles from season to season. They found themselves having the same circular arguments about family loyalty and personal autonomy, each conversation leaving them more exhausted and less hopeful about finding a resolution. Michael worked on his Bel Air alone in his parents' garage, Each bolt turned and panel sanded, feeling like a small act of rebuilding not just a car, but his own identity, much like an athlete recovering from injury determined to make an incredible comeback. The restoration became his therapy, his way of processing the family conflict that felt as complex and systemic as an Airbus recall investigation, with layers of history and emotion that needed careful examination. The turning point came when Henry suffered a heart attack that shook the entire family to its core. Rushed to the hospital during a storm that mirrored the worst Chicago weather he'd ever seen. His first coherent words to Sarah were simple but profound. "Is Michael coming?" When Michael arrived, holding his grandfather's hand in the ICU with tears in his eyes, Henry whispered something that would change everything. "I was wrong about the car. About your father. I was so busy defending my father's legacy that I forgot to build my own." During Henry's recovery, Michael made a bold decision that would either heal their relationship or widen the divide further. He asked his grandfather to help him with the transmission rebuild on the Bel Air, the most complex part of the restoration. Henry, initially as hesitant as a coach considering whether to start a rookie like Arch Manning, eventually agreed, recognizing that this might be their last chance to bridge the gap between them. What happened in that garage over the next 6 weeks became the foundation for their emotional healing, transforming a space that had once represented division into a sanctuary of reconciliation. At first, they worked in near silence, the only sounds being the turning of wrenches and the occasional instruction from Henry about proper technique, his Ford expertise reluctantly applied to Michael's Chevy project. But as problems were solved and progress was made, something shifted in their dynamic. Henry began sharing stories. Michael had never heard about his own father, disapproval when he wanted to be an engineer instead of a factory worker, about the pressure he'd felt to carry on the family tradition, about the dreams he sacrificed to be the good Ford son who never questioned his father's choices. Michael, in turn, shared why the Bel Air mattered to him, not as a rejection of Ford, but as a symbol of finding his own path, of building something from nothing, of creating rather than inheriting. He explained how each restored part represented a piece of himself he was discovering, how the project had taught him patience and perseverance during the loneliest years of the family conflict. One afternoon, while struggling with a stubborn bolt during weather that reminded them both of unpredictable Chicago weather patterns, Henry said something that would become their family's new mantra. "You know, Michael, I've spent my life thinking loyalty meant never changing your mind. But maybe real loyalty means being willing to change your heart when love requires it." The completed Bel Air reveal happened on Henry's 80th birthday, creating excitement in the family that rivaled any Eagles playoff game anticipation, with everyone holding their breath to see how Henry would react to the finished project. The entire family gathered in the driveway as Michael rolled the freshly painted, perfectly restored 1957 Chevrolet out of the garage, its chrome gleaming in the afternoon sun like a promise kept. But what happened next surprised everyone more than an upset in Michigan football, defying all expectations and rewriting the family narrative in a single moment. Henry walked up to the driver's side, opened the door with a hand that trembled slightly, and said, "Your turn to ride shotgun, Michael." "I want to see what all the fuss is about," his voice filled with a curiosity and openness that hadn't been there in years. As they drove through their small town, Henry at the wheel of the car he'd once rejected, something magical happened that transcended brand loyalty and family tradition. People waved, gave thumbs up, shouted compliments about the beautiful restoration, the universal language of automotive, appreciation that transcends brand names, much like how great football transcends rivalries, whether it's Ohio State versus Michigan or Texas football. When they returned to the family waiting anxiously in the driveway, Henry gathered everyone together and made an announcement that would redefine their family legacy forever, his voice strong and clear. "From now on, the Johnson family tradition isn't about Ford or Chevrolet. It's about passion. It's about craftsmanship. It's about respecting the past while making room for the future. And it's about understanding that the only brand that really matters is family. Today, the Johnson garage houses both Henry, this meticulously maintained 1965 Mustang, and Michael, this beautifully restored 1957 Bel Air, standing side by side not as rivals, but as partners in the family's automotive story. They represent not division, but diversity, the incredible comeback of a family that learned to value connection over correctness, understanding over judgment, and love over loyalty to anything else. Henry and Michael now attend car shows together, each proudly explaining their respective vehicles to curious onlookers who often express surprise at their harmonious partnership. The rivalry that once divided them has become their greatest bonding experience. They've discovered that loving different things doesn't mean loving each other, less much like how fans can appreciate great Michigan football while still cheering for their own teams. Sarah and Carl's marriage, once strained by the brand conflict, is stronger than ever, having survived the test of family division and emerged with deeper understanding and commitment. They've started a YouTube channel documenting their Ford versus Chevy family adventures, turning their past pain into content that helps other families navigate similar divisions, showing that reconciliation is possible even after years of conflict. The most beautiful transformation has been in Henry himself, who at 82 has become the family's wise elder, sharing the life lessons he learned through his personal transformation with anyone who will listen. I spent 60 years thinking I was honoring my father by never questioning his choices. He reflects during family gatherings, but the greatest honor I could give him was to become the kind of man who could admit when he was wrong, who could apologize when he'd hurt someone, and who could learn that love is always more important than being right. The Johnson family story teaches us that emotional connections to brands, traditions, and legacies aren't inherently good or bad. They become problematic only when they prevent us from seeing and loving the people right in front of us, when they create walls where there should be bridges. Their journey from division to unity, from judgment to acceptance, from rigid tradition to evolving legacy, proves that personal transformation is possible at any age and that emotional healing can happen even after decades of conflict and silence. What began as a simple choice between a Ford and a Chevrolet became a masterclass in what it means to build a family legacy that honors the past, while embracing the future one based not on unwavering consistency, but on the courage to grow, forgive, and choose love over loyalty to anything else. The Johnsons discovered that true legacy isn't about preserving the past unchanged, but about creating space for the future to unfold in its own beautiful, unexpected way. The garage that once housed only Fords now stands as a testament to the power of reconciliation, containing not just vehicles, but the living history of a family that learned to value people over principles and connection over correctness. And in that transformation, they found the true meaning of family legacy, not in the badges on their grills, but in the love in their hearts and the wisdom to know what truly matters when everything else is stripped away.